My stepson brought his dad over and said I didn't belong there. I quietly packed up, walked out, and left every expense behind. A month later, their family was renting a single room together. Don't forget to subscribe and share your experiences below. Let's get started. My name's Michael. I'm 46, a construction foreman out of Austin. I've spent the last 3 decades hauling other people's dreams out of the dirt. Steel-toed boots, calloused hands, sun-split neck, and the kind of back that only knows pain. I know what it means to build something from nothing, and what it means to watch it fall apart right in front of you. 5 years ago, I married Kate. Blonde, soft-spoken, kind in the way that makes you second-guess your own rough edges. She worked nights at a local clinic and had a quiet way of folding herself around other people's needs. I mistook that for warmth. Maybe that was my first mistake. She had a teenage son, Jason. 15, all bone and bitterness. That boy walked like the world owed him an apology. He had that look in his eyes, not just sadness but calculation. Like he was already measuring how much of himself he had to give before he could walk away clean. He didn't look at me at the wedding. Didn't shake my hand. Just stood next to Kate in that too big blazer, arms crossed, eyes flat. Like he was watching a stranger steal his last safe thing. And maybe I was. But I didn't come to replace his father. I never wanted that. Rick, that was his name. The father. He lived out of state, somewhere in New Mexico, and showed up maybe twice a year. Always unannounced. Always smiling. Jason would light up like a switch had been flipped, and for a few days the boy would laugh again. Rick would take him out, ball games, restaurants, whatever trick he had in his pocket that year. Then he'd disappear again, leaving behind a mess of expectations and the scent of new cologne. And me? I was the one left sweeping up the pieces. The one who made sure Jason had groceries, a warm jacket in winter, books for school. I covered Rick's half of the bills when the checks didn't come. I picked up extra shifts to make sure there was gas in the car, lights in the house, food in the fridge. I never kept receipts. Never brought it up. I figured real fathers don't keep score. I figured the kid would see that eventually. But some debts are invisible to the people who owe them. Jason never said thank you. Not once. If anything, the more I gave, the colder he got. Like my presence itself was some kind of betrayal. I chalked it up to his age. Teenagers are glass in a windstorm. Everything cuts. But this boy, he was different. He watched me the way a coyote watches barbed wire. Like I was just another obstacle between him and what he thought he deserved. Still, I tried. I showed up to parent-teacher conferences, even when I wasn't listed on the forms. Sat in the back of the gym during his basketball games. Clapping quietly, never too loud. Didn't want to embarrass him. I paid for his driving lessons, his insurance, and when he turned 17, I helped him buy a used Civic from a guy I knew through work. He didn't say a word when I handed him the keys. Just took them, climbed in, and drove off like it was owed. Kate saw it. She said things would take time. That Jason was still healing from the divorce, from the absence, from everything Rick hadn't done. I believed her. I had to. Otherwise, I'd have to admit that I was building a house on rot. Every few months, Rick would call. Usually after Kate texted him, reminding him child support was due. He always promised to make it right soon. Always had a story. A bad quarter, a lost client, some investment that didn't pan out. Then he'd send $100 in a card with a note. Proud of you, kiddo. Jason kept every one of those notes. Taped them to the side of his mirror like they were gospel. He never once framed the paycheck stubs that kept his lights on. Still, I stayed in the background. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet long enough, kept giving, kept showing up, eventually the silence between us would turn into something solid. But silence, I learned, is a kind of agreement. And in that house, silence meant I didn't matter. When Jason turned 18, we threw a small party. Just family. He didn't invite any friends. Didn't speak much during dinner. Rick didn't come, but he called in the middle of the meal. Jason took the call outside. Talked for 40 minutes. Came back in smiling. Didn't touch his cake. That was the same night he told me, casually like he was reading a grocery list, that he was thinking of moving in with Rick for college. Said it like a threat, like a test. I said nothing. just nodded. But inside, something in me sank. A heaviness I couldn't explain. Not grief, not jealousy, just the slow realization that I had been renting space in someone else's story. A footnote in the life of a boy who didn't even want me in the margins. Still, I helped him apply to schools, filled out FAFSA forms, co-signed the loans, met with his advisor while Kate stayed home with a headache. When it came time for orientation, Rick promised he'd fly in. Be there for my boy. Last minute, he canceled. Something about work. So I drove Jason to campus. Car packed full. Dropped him off. Carried his boxes up 3 flights of stairs while he scrolled through his phone. At the door of his dorm, I said, "If you need anything, you call me." He said, "Sure." No hug. No handshake. Not even eye contact. On the drive home, I tried not to take it personally. I told myself he was just overwhelmed. Just young. But deep down, I knew. I wasn't a presence in his life, I was a placeholder. The man who filled in when the real one was absent. The man who paid the bills, picked up the pieces, bore the weight. And the second it was convenient, I'd be erased. Kate never talked about that drive. Never asked how it went. Just poured me a drink, kissed my cheek, and said, "He's lucky to have you." But words like that only go so far when your place in the family feels conditional. Temporary. Like you're one bad day away from being replaced by a myth with better stories and worse credit. From that point on, it was like the air in the house shifted. Jason came home less and less. When he did, he brought Rick's voice with him. Ideas, opinions, judgments. Rick says you're too hard on me. Rick thinks I should focus on my music. Rick said maybe I shouldn't be taking out loans if someone else could be helping. Someone else. That's what I'd become. Not Michael. Not even Mom's husband. Just someone else. Every time he said it, something in my chest twisted. I told myself it didn't matter. That names were just words. But they weren't. They were declarations. Boundaries. And Jason had drawn his line clear. When I asked him once, just once, to help me mow the lawn, he rolled his eyes and muttered, "You're not my dad." He didn't even look at me when he said it. Just said it like a reflex, like brushing off lint. And Kate, she didn't say a thing. Just kept washing dishes while I stood there in the silence he left behind. That was the night I stopped trying to fix it. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember the day not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. The way silence filled that house like smoke. Thick, suffocating, poisonous in the way only neglect can be. It was late. I'd come home from a site 3 hours out in Waco, arms sore from hauling drywall into a building that didn't even have windows yet. My boots were caked in red clay. My back was screaming. I'd been running on gas station coffee and beef jerky for 16 hours. And all I wanted, just one thing, was to sit down and eat dinner with my wife. The house was dark when I walked in. Not empty, just dark. Like it had chosen not to welcome me. I dropped my tool belt by the door and called out, "Kate!" No answer. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock I installed last year when the old one stopped. Tick, tick, tick. Every second that passed felt like a warning. Then I heard voices from the living room. Male voices. I walked in and there they were. Jason, slouched on the couch with a smugness I'd come to know too well, and Rick, standing by the staircase like he belonged there. He had the same grin he always wore, like a magician who just pulled a coin out of your ear and expects applause. His arms were folded across his chest, his posture casual, like the house was his. "Evenin'," he said, like we were old drinking buddies. Jason looked up at me, didn't even nod, just flicked his eyes to Rick like I was an afterthought. "What's this?" I asked, careful to keep my voice level. Rick smiled. That same practiced, empty smile. "We were just talking, Jason and I, about how things are gonna look moving forward." "Moving forward?" I repeated. He stepped off the last stair like he was stepping onto a stage. "Yeah, we've decided it's time I take a more active role. Be more present. Jason wants that. We think maybe it's time you gave us some space." No anger, no shame, just that grin. Jason nodded slowly. No words, just an obedient little bob of the head. as if Rick had said something sacred, and he was the disciple agreeing. I turned to Jason. "You want him here?" Still no words. Just a glance. Cold. Dismissive. Like I'd asked if he wanted ketchup with his fries. And behind me, I heard Kate's footsteps on the stairs. She stopped halfway down, watching, arms crossed, not saying a goddamn thing. That was the moment. Not Rick's intrusion. Not Jason's nod. It was Kate's silence that shattered something in me. Because silence is a choice. It's an agreement. And she had made hers. I looked at all three of them. Kate on the stairs, Jason on the couch, Rick by the door, and I realized the truth. I was a tenant in my own home. A workhorse with no name. A walking wallet they tolerated because I kept the lights on and the fridge full. "If I'm not wanted here," I said, quiet and even, "then you can have it all." Rick raised an eyebrow. Jason blinked. Kate didn't move. I walked past them without another word. Went to our bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my hands. Rough, cracked, nails dirty from a day spent building someone else's future. I had used these hands to hold this family up for 5 years. But all they saw was a stranger. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the soft murmur of their voices downstairs. They laughed once. I don't know who said what. Doesn't matter. All I heard was that laugh, and I knew it wasn't mine. At dawn, I started packing. I didn't make a scene. No shouting. No last-minute begging. Just packed. My tools, my clothes, the books nobody ever noticed I read. Left the wedding photo on the dresser. Let them keep it. A souvenir of a man who was never truly there. Before I left, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and opened every account I had linked to that house. Mortgage, utilities, car insurance, Jason's college fund, his phone bill, the credit card he used for gas. I clicked cancel on each one like pulling plugs from a dying machine. One by one, I let it all go. By noon, I was gone. I didn't leave a note. Didn't text. Just disappeared the same way Rick always did. Let them taste the silence I had swallowed for years. A week passed. I stayed in a cheap motel on the edge of town. Shower curtain barely hung on the rod. Air conditioner rattled like a dying engine. But it was mine. No voices. No tension. Just quiet. Then the text started. Kate first. "Hey, we need to talk about the bills." The electric company called. The mortgage payment bounced. Jason's tuition's due next week. I didn't answer. She called 3 times. Left voicemails that started calm and ended with panic. Then Jason texted. "Dude, my phone's off." What the hell? Not Michael. Not stepdad. Just dude. As if I were a buddy who'd forgotten to pick up a beer run. I blocked the number. The next day, Kate texted again. This one longer. Rick had to leave. Something about work. Jason's having a hard time adjusting. Things are tight. We're looking for options. Can we please just talk? I didn't reply. 3 weeks later, I heard from a buddy that the house was up for rent. They'd moved out. Not into a new place. Into a motel room on I-35. The same strip I'd once rescued Jason from when his car broke down and Rick was too busy to answer. Rick disappeared again. Of course he did. That's what he was good at. I sat in my motel room, stared at the text thread with Kate, and deleted it. No anger. Just clarity. They chose. They made their decision with every shrug, every silence. Every look passed over me like I was furniture. They wanted space. Now they had it. No roof. No insurance. No tuition. No comfort. Just the reality they had crafted. A father who disappears and a man who refuses to be stepped on. The silence that follows betrayal isn't empty. It's loud. Deafening. A chorus of every moment I swallowed for the sake of peace. And peace, I finally realized, should never cost your self-respect. Silence is supposed to heal. That's what people say. Give it time, step back, breathe, the wounds will close on their own. But silence doesn't heal. It rots. It eats through the hours like rust through steel, leaving you weaker, hollower, until you start to wonder if maybe the noise was better. At least noise reminds you you're alive. I'd been gone a month before Kate finally called. Not a text this time. A call. I almost didn't answer. But the thing about 5 years of shared history is that you still know the sound of someone's breath before they speak. I could hear the guilt before I heard her voice. Michael, she said. Just my name. Quiet. Thin. Like she was afraid it might break if she said it too loud. Yeah, I said. There was a long pause. The kind that fills up with every word left unsaid. Then, softly, she started talking. About the house. The bills. The credit cards. Rick's promises that vanished as fast as his shadow. Jason dropping out of classes because the tuition payments stopped. She didn't ask me to come back. Not yet. She just wanted help. Until we get back on our feet, she said. Like it was a business transaction, not a marriage. I listened. Didn't interrupt. Let her talk until her voice cracked. Then I said the only thing that felt true. I don't hold a grudge. But it's time he learns what responsibility costs. She went quiet. I could hear Jason in the background. A muffled voice. Sharp. Frustrated. Probably asking who she was talking to. Probably assuming I'd cave. That's what they'd both expected for years. That I'd always show up, always pay, always fix. But I wasn't that man anymore. After she hung up, I sat there in the half-dark of that motel room, staring at my reflection in the black screen of the TV. For the first time in years, I saw a man who didn't know anyone anything. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. And I understood something I'd refused to face for half a decade. I'd been trying to buy my place in a family that never wanted me in it. I moved out of the motel that week. Found a small apartment above a hardware store in South Austin. 1 bedroom. A window that overlooked the parking lot. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every bill had my name on it. Every dollar earned and spent began and ended with me. It wasn't freedom exactly. More like the quiet ache that comes after the storm. When you're still standing, but you don't know if that's victory or just survival. Days passed differently there. Slower. I'd wake up before dawn, drink black coffee by the window, and listen to the city wake up. Delivery trucks, barking dogs, the sound of someone's radio drifting up from the street. Work became simpler too. I stopped chasing promotions. I clocked in, did my job, clocked out. No phone buzzing in my pocket. No texts about emergencies that were really just someone else's laziness. The noise was gone, and for a while that silence almost felt like peace. Then one evening she called again. It was a Thursday. I remember because the sun was bleeding out over the rooftops, the kind of orange light that makes everything look like it's on fire. My phone buzzed, and there it was, her name. For a moment, I thought about letting it ring out, but I didn't. Michael, she said again, that same voice, softer this time. Can we talk? I didn't say no. She told me Jason was struggling, couldn't find steady work, had dropped out of school completely. Rick was gone again. He left in the middle of the night, she said, like she was still surprised. Took what was left of Jason's savings. We haven't heard from him in weeks. There was no anger in her voice, just exhaustion, like the last bit of air leaving a balloon. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. The story was always the same. Rick came back, promised redemption, left destruction. Jason followed, blamed everyone but himself. Kate enabled. And I was supposed to clean it up. Jason wanted me to call you, she said finally. He said you'd understand. That maybe you could help. I let the silence stretch. Let it sit between us until it became heavy. Help how? I asked. I don't know, she said. He's lost, Michael. He doesn't know what to do. He keeps saying he just needs a chance to get back on track. Maybe if you could talk to him. I stopped her there. Kate, I'm not his father. Came out steady, almost gentle. But the words hit her like a slap. I could hear it in her breath. I never said you were, she whispered. No, I said. But you let him say it, over and over, until he believed it. And now he's got exactly what he wanted, life without me. He made his choice. She didn't reply, just the sound of quiet breathing. Then a shaky, you were the only one who ever really cared. That line sat with me long after the call ended. I wanted to take comfort in it, but I couldn't. Because it wasn't confession, it was admission. She knew what she'd done, what she'd allowed, and knowing didn't change a damn thing. After that, the calls came less often. Then not at all. I heard through friends that they'd moved again. Smaller place, then a motel, then a friend's couch. Jason picked up odd jobs but never stayed long. Rick resurfaced once more. Some rumor about a new girlfriend, a new state, a new life. The pattern kept spinning without me. But here's the truth that settled in my bones. The world doesn't punish you for walking away. It just stops pretending to need you. Sometimes, on my way home from a late shift, I drive past the old neighborhood, past that house I'd once built a life in. The porch light was gone, the lawn overgrown, curtains drawn. Once, I saw a for rent sign nailed to the front post, weather-beaten and crooked. I parked across the street, rolled down the window, and just sat there for a while. That house used to hum with noise. Jason's music rattling the walls, Kate's laughter echoing down the hall, the low rumble of my own voice trying to hold everything together. Now it was silent, hollow, like a shell that had already forgotten the people who'd lived inside it. I didn't feel anger, didn't feel pity either, just distance, like I was watching someone else's story conclude from far away. And maybe that's what it really was, a story I'd mistaken for mine. The next morning, I stopped by the bank, closed the last joint account that still had Kate's name on it. The clerk asked if I wanted to leave a note on the file for the other party. I said no. There was nothing left to explain. Back home, I made coffee, stood by the window, and watched a young couple argue in the parking lot below. She was crying. He was trying to hold her hand. Some part of me wanted to look away. Another part wanted to warn them. Tell them that love built on silence collapses louder than any fight. But I said nothing. People don't learn from advice. They learn from loss. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming. And when I woke the next morning, the world felt cleaner. Empty but clean. Like the last of the dust had finally settled. That's when I realized something simple, something cruel, something true. I hadn't lost a family. I'd stopped financing a fantasy. When you've spent years carrying people who call you a stranger, letting go isn't cruelty. It's clarity. I didn't ruin them. I just stopped pretending I could save them. Because the bill always comes due. And sometimes payment is silence. I drove past the house one last time. It had been nearly a year since I left. But the old neighborhood hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same rusting mailboxes, same brittle oak trees that always dropped their leaves too early. But the house was different. The paint was peeling. The grass had turned to weeds. And in the front window, crooked behind yellowed curtains, hung a sign, for rent. It didn't surprise me. That place was never going to hold together without someone paying the price. And I'd stopped paying. I parked across the street. Engine off. Windows down. The wind carried the faint smell of cut grass and something burnt. Maybe someone grilling 2 doors down. I stared at the porch where I'd once fixed the steps after Jason tripped and skinned his knee. Where I'd sat in the dark waiting for Kate to come home after her late shifts. Where I'd carried groceries, backpacks, arguments, promises. Now it just sagged, like a mouth missing its teeth. The house looked like what it had always been. Temporary. A container. A shell. I never went back inside. Not once. I thought about it. Wondered if maybe I'd left something behind. A tool. A book. A jacket. But the truth is, anything worth holding had already been taken or forgotten. Everything else. Memories, expectations, love without return. I let rot inside the walls. Kate never reached out again. Not after that last call. I think in some quiet part of her, she knew the door had closed. Knew the space I'd once filled was never going to open again. Not for her. Not for Jason. Not for anyone. And Jason, he never said sorry. Never called. Never wrote. I saw his name once. Tagged in a social media post, someone's grainy photo of him hauling sound equipment at a bar downtown. No degree. No job with benefits. Just gigs. Paychecks handed under the table. That same slouch in his shoulders. That same defiance in his eyes. Still chasing Rick's ghost. Still waiting for a father who only ever existed in stories. I didn't click the photo, didn't save it, didn't want to, because I had learned something the hard way. Some sons aren't looking for fathers. They're looking for someone to blame when their fantasies collapse. And I wasn't going to be that man anymore. There's a kind of mourning that doesn't come with funerals. No caskets, no flowers, just empty chairs and quiet mornings and bills with names that no longer belong to you. That's the grief I lived with after walking away. Not from a wife, not from a stepson, but from a role I was never truly allowed to play. People talk about healing like it's a sunrise, slow, beautiful, inevitable. But mine didn't come with light, came with darkness, with empty rooms and quiet evenings and the taste of bitterness that finally stopped turning my stomach. I learned how to be alone again. Not lonely, just alone. There's a difference. I bought a toolbox that only I used. Cooked meals for one. Watched the shows I liked without negotiating the remote. On weekends, I started driving out to the hill country, no destination, just open road. I liked the silence out there. The kind that doesn't ask questions. The kind that doesn't demand apologies. Some nights I'd lie awake and think about the early years. Before the rot, before the resentment, back when I still believed I could earn my place through hard work, through patience, through sacrifice. I used to think love was like concrete. If you poured enough of it, it would hold. That if you filled the cracks fast enough, the structure would stay standing. But that's not how it works. Sometimes the foundation's bad. Sometimes the blueprints were flawed before you even showed up with your tools. And sometimes you're just the wrong man for a job that never should have been offered. One morning, months after I'd stopped expecting anything, I got a letter. Real envelope. No return address. Just my name, written in the shaky hand of someone who hadn't written anything by mail in years. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. No greeting. No signature. Just 7 words. I didn't know what I had. Sorry. It wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting. I'd seen it on grocery lists, on the side of school projects, on the envelope I'd left tucked under Jason's pillow the day I helped him move into his dorm. I read it once, then again, and then I burned it. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because I didn't need it. An apology delivered after the damage is done isn't redemption. It's regret. And regret isn't enough. Not when you've carried the weight for years, only to be told you never belonged. I watched the flame eat the paper, curl the corners, blacken the ink, and I felt nothing. No peace, no closure, just the end. And maybe that was enough. I live a quiet life now. 1 bedroom, 1 coffee mug, 1 paycheck. No debts I didn't choose. No voices in the hallway telling me I don't belong. I carry only what I want to carry. No more sons with other men's names. No more women who let boys turn into tyrants. No more houses built on shifting sand. Some people say I'm bitter. That's fine. Let them. I'd rather be bitter than blind. I'd rather be alone than bled dry. Because family, real family, isn't built on shared last names or bloodlines. It's built on something simpler, something harder. Respect. Not demanded. Not begged for. Given freely. Held steady. And if that's not there, then nothing else matters. So here I am, years later, asking the same question I asked myself the night I closed the door and walked away from them forever. Was I wrong? Was I wrong to cancel the payments? To stop covering the bills? To leave them to the consequences they tried to hand off to me? Was I wrong to expect gratitude after years of sacrifice? To demand respect before giving more of myself? To say enough? Tell me, what would you have done? Would you have stayed? Would you have paid? Or would you, like me, have finally asked the question every forgotten man asks before he disappears? What am I, if not the one who always gives? And what do I become, if I finally stop?